Women who gave the creep a chance, how did it go?
I walked in on him peeing in my washing machine after letting him in my home for some reason.
Literally the first comment and I'm already making a face. Let's see how much worse it gets from here. Edit, thanks for the upvotes and awards. Didn't expect this to blow up.
Very sad, long story. He RPD me. I threw a rock at his car and I was arrested for criminal mischief and domestic violence. Everyone called me crazy and I stopped going out. That was over 10 years ago. I'm a homebody spinster teacher. We were in no way, shape, or form in any kind of relationship. I'd seen him around. I was told cops just put that DV charge on a lot for some reasons that I can't even come up with ATM.
He slit his wrists and showed me on FaceTime the blood dripping out while he was crying. Just because I broke up with him.
A friend's ex did the same, he only sent photos though. We called an ambulance who called the fire department to break open his front door. It turned out to be hot sauce. He had to pay for the whole, pricey event. She never heard from him again.
The dude in the flat across from mine started off as a really nice guy. Introduced himself. Offered meals when he'd cooked too much. Just a great guy all round. Within a few weeks, it was made clear that he was an alcoholic. I have a recovering brother, so I really sympathized with him. I went out of my way to sit with him, and eventually called him an ambulance when he fitted from withdrawals, UK, so calling an ambulance is free. This carried on for a little while, with me sitting with him 2 or 3 times a week, waiting for an ambulance. One night after he started fitting, he kept grabbing my breasts. I was already on the phone to the ambulance service, but the woman heard me telling him to stop and sent police as well. He was carted off, and just like usual, I grabbed his keys and told him to knock for them the next morning. Well, the NRXT time I looked after him, the groping got worse. And then slowly so did my life. Suddenly I had fires set outside my windows, and mutilated rat corpses left on my doorstep. The police were called after every incident, and I got to know one policeman who was put on my case really well. He suggested I put up cameras, so I did. There was footage of the neighbor standing outside in the yard at 3 a.m., just staring into my window, multiple nights in a row. Terrifying, but not illegal. Well, 2 weeks after that, my neighbor snapped. There were builders in the garden next to ours, and they apparently woke him up at 4 p.m. He ran out with a kitchen knife and stabbed 2 of the builders and the neighbor's dog. Everyone survived. He also slashed a whole bunch of tires on our street. When the police came to search the dude's flat, my policeman friend told me, off the books, that the neighbor had been faking being an alcoholic the entire time. He'd get in the ambulance, ride to the hospital, and then check himself out and walk home. Also, they found half a dozen decomposing rats in his bathtub. They'd been mutilated. They later found a bloody hammer under his bed. You'd think him being arrested would be the end of it, but no. He put my name, picture, address, and telephone number on a prostitution site. I had men aggressively hounding me for sex multiple times an hour for 2 entire weeks before I just cut all ties and fled the city. Last I heard, he was in jail for the GBH, but that was a few years ago now. Yeah, never gonna make the same mistake again.
Bloody hell. This was one heck of a read. Poo keeps getting worse.
He stalked me for almost 8 months, and I still do not want to know how he got my address. I was 19, he was 31. And #X200B. God, I was so naive.
I had a bad vibe, but my friend told me he was a good guy. So we went on a date and he asked to drive my car. He curbed my rims and talked about how he was fired unfairly from his job. The next weekend I avoided his calls and instead went out to dinner with friends. While I was gone, he broke into my apartment. My neighbors and the cops were waiting outside when I got home. I spent the night at my mom's. He showed up at 03:00 when the my let him out and was trying to get in a window. Wonderful officer spent the rest of the night in the driveway. Fast forward a couple weeks and he shows up at my work, mopes over to me and hands me folded papers. It was 8 to 10 handwritten front and back notebook papers where he alternated between telling me I was the love of his life to why he hated me and wished I would die. I was terrified. Security escorted him away. Never saw him again but found out later he did the same thing to some girl in Spokane, but he was able to actually get in, beat her and landed her in the hospital. Edit. The friend was dating my best friend and the good guy was his cousin. I think he really wanted us to hit it off so the four of us could all hang out together or something. He was shocked by the actions of his cousin but did tell me later that he had thought he changed. They're not longer dating and haven't talked to him in years and years. This happened 20 years ago in the PNW.
This is why people shouldn't pressure others into poo they've got a bad feeling about. Hope your friend learned a lessons and I hope you're doing well.
Guy had serious untreated mental health problems, which resulted in him spending 4 years stalking me and making me resent giving that one chance. I made multiple calls to police and paramedics because he would call me up threatening suicide unless I would help him. He still finds me on social medias and random gaming apps to say, "Hi, I miss you, but I now live more than 1,000 kilometers away."
I have one that looks me up every couple of years to do a post-mortem. He needs closure and thinks we should heal together. Bro, we broke up literally 17 years ago. This poo is closed.
Met him when I worked as a cashier in a small downtown shop. Wasn't my type and seemed a little off, but I was young and had zero real dating experience. Agreed to grab coffee as a friend and made it clear I didn't have a romantic interest. He became convinced he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy. The Great Gatsby film had just come out that year. Started stalking me and endlessly sending letters and gifts to me at work describing how we were fated to be together. When I confronted him to stop, he started having his friends follow me at work or drop by to check in on me. Prowled outside on nights I had to close shop alone. I ended up quitting that job and things fizzled. 7 months later I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the same dude. He just got released from a short prison sentence and was letting me know he thought of me every day and was going to find me so we could finally be together. I made up a story that I was traveling abroad for college and would be gone indefinitely. Changed my number and luckily haven't heard from him again.
What's weird about all these stories is the support the stalkers receive from their social circles. I had to wait 2 weeks for one friend to be available to help me move some tooling. I can't think of anyone I could get to help me run some sort of reconnaissance operation on a woman who's not into me.
Oh gosh. Same here. I tried to ask the shop owner to ban him and his buddies, but the owner insisted I was overreacting to puppy love, and didn't take me seriously.
Back in high school, several of my female friends and I, also female, had an off period before lunch, so we were all sitting around a table chatting. One of the female security guards came up to us and told me that there was a new exchange student from Amsterdam that thought I was cute, but he was too nervous to come over and introduce himself. I have zero interest in men, but I figured there wasn't any harm in letting the guy come sit with us and helping him feel more comfortable at our school. So he comes over, sits down with us, and chats a bit. He seemed rather shy, and he had about a dozen piercings going up each arm that he kept fiddling with, and a bunch of facial piercings. Then class lets out and people, including a bunch of my male friends, start showing up for lunch. First male friend sits down and introduces himself. New guy doesn't not respond at all, doesn't even look at friend. Weird. Maybe just shy. Second male friend comes and sits down. Same thing. Slightly unsettling now. We kept trying to include him over lunch but he would only respond to the women. Wouldn't even acknowledge the other guys at the table. I never talked to him again after that lunch period, and 2 weeks later he got expelled for slamming a girl against a locker and choking her to the point she nearly passed out.
Did one video chat with him during which he asked if he could call me again later in the day. When I told him, no, I'll be busy, I started getting random text messages throughout my day that said, "Are you okay? Just let me know you're okay." The first I responded to, I said, "Hey, yeah, I'm fine. I just hung up with you 30 minutes ago, bud." He took that as a sign that I wanted to talk more, so he attempted another video call. When I didn't respond, he started again with the texts. Didn't even bother responding to the rest. Up to 20 unread messages later before I was able to block him while leaving him on read.
He got very obsessed with me. I had to be straight up rude to get him to leave me alone because he wouldn't understand when I asked nicely. He later self-harmed on his own wrists and went around telling people to ask me why he did that. Edit might be relevant, but I was 17 and he was 26.
Knew he was weird before the first date. I was sad and thought maybe he'd be different in person. Showed up to the date and he walked with a crazy limp. Told me he was into pee stuff, wouldn't pay for dinner, tried to kiss me 3 times. When I got home that night he sent me a full-body nude completely out of the blue. I never saw him again. He texted me 3 months later to tell me I was the worst human and most selfish person he's ever met. And then he blocked me. Woozy face.
Reading this I realized I actually have something to contribute lol. I gave him a chance in high school. I was 15, he was 18. Ended with him sticking his tongue down my throat several times quite aggressively, joking about stabbing me as he lunged a knife at me and laughed about it while carving pumpkins, and threatened to shoot up the school with a list of names, my friend and I's being top of the list. He got suspended and no one ever saw him again. Update, my friends and I found out he's now in the military.
He sexually assaulted me and got mad when I told him I just wanted to be friends. The friends part was to get him to leave my house.
He stalked me. He made videos of himself crying because I broke his heart after him knowing me for a month. He told everyone I was just a fat W who used men. I didn't take anything from him or have sex with him. I gave him a whole month and every time I would hang out he would keep me up until 3 a.m. crying that I didn't love him. It was bad.
He threatened suicide when I tried to break up with him, and he eventually started stalking me when I did end things. Don't date a creep.
I sadly had to learn this lesson very young, that when someone suicide baits you, the best thing to do is call the non-emergency police line for a wellness check, emergency if you really think they're capable or on the verge. Usually that gets the message across that you won't F around. Happened to a few of my friends in high school, getting baited, not doing the baiting, and eventually we just learned to call their parents or the cops.
This guy was handsome but way too into me for knowing nothing about me. It wasn't like when we spoke I was an open book or felt a strong connection that would lead me to want to share info with him. This was not a, I feel like I've known this man forever, connection. I just thought this was normal dating but had a gut feeling something was off. He talked to me like I'd been his girlfriend for months. We went on 3 dates, never even had sex. After 3rd date I had made my decision based on our short time getting to know one another and let him know I had no interest in continuing to date and that I didn't see us being compatible long term. He then locked me in his car, proceeded to ask if I wanted to move to California with him, WTF, and started crying, begging me to work this out. I tried to be very nice, but it got to the point I was scared and wasn't sure how this was going to go since he was virtually a stranger. So I hit his dashboard and said if he didn't let me out of the car immediately I was calling the police. Then he threatened to kill himself if I didn't spend the night with him at his house. I'd never even been to this man's house. He finally let me out after like an hour or 2 but stayed in the parking lot of my apartment almost the entire night and called me non-stop. About a month later he texted me out of the blue a reaally long paragraph apologizing profusely and saying if I ever change my mind to call him. I just said thanks for the apology and wished him well. Hope he's doing okay, but I wanted no part of that.
Wow, I had something similar happen when I was 18-ish. I was modeling at the time and volunteered for a date auction for charity, and some guy like 10 years older and I sorta knew than me, bought me. We went on our date a few weeks later, dinner and a mini golf or something, and the date was kinda awkward but fine, and afterwards I said, okay, that was nice. Time to take me home. Instead he drove me to his house and insisted I join him for a nightcap. I refused and he locked the doors and wouldn't let me out. This was in the days of pre-cell phones, so I couldn't even call 911. Eventually, after over an hour of him telling me how I owe him some more company cause he paid so much for me, I got nearly hysterical and told him that if he didn't take me home this instant I would kick his window out and scream for someone to call the cops. He did take me home and was all surly about it, and I couldn't get out of that car fast enough. Like you though, I didn't tell anyone. It was so messed up. I'm certain he was planning to roofie and RP me.
He stabbed my end table with a knife after getting upset with me. Then started stalking me. I moved and invested in cameras for my house and a dash cam. 1 million emails, police reports, etc. O and his twin brother RPD and stalked girls a few years prior. Ended up killing 2 police officers. Seems like creep runs in the family. Edit. The twin brother murdered. Not my ex. Maybe would have been killed myself if I stuck around long enough. Also, my ex didn't start off as this psychopath and I just so happened to like his crazy. He seemed like a misunderstood man, and his true self started showing after a few months into our relationship. Slowly at first, and then very quickly turned bad.
Holy poo, how do people get like that?
I wish I knew. I only listed the more mild things. It took a lot of therapy, medicine, and a loving support system to overcome what he put me through. I still look over my shoulder every day.
On our first date, he told me he loved me and that he would let me pick out the color of our house. The rest of the evening was super awkward. I never talked to him again.
Stuff like this makes me wonder what would happen if there were 2 people who were equally obsessed with each other in that way. Like if they both wanted to be with each other all the time, don't even want to talk to other people, etc. Like would they even have a happy relationship, or would they just get violent with each other anytime one of did anything and there was a misunderstanding?
I bought him a coffee one time and we chatted about our music tastes. 3 days later, I was sitting in my dorm and I got a text from him that was just a selfie. I sent one back and the conversation got really boring, so I sent him a snap of a black screen. He responded, "Are you in a dark place?" And I said, "Yeah lol." His response was, "Well, you'll have to leave soon because you have class in insert building with insert professor at 6 o'clock. I literally never told him anything about my classes, so he just effing stalked me until he learned my entire schedule. It turns out he was a serial creep preying on freshman girls.
My college had a database of student info that anyone could access, ostensibly for email addresses, but it also included full names, home addresses and classes, and no one in admin thought it was a bad idea, somehow. Students called it Stalker Notes, BC it was _notes. I literally forget its actual name.
Oh wow, that's terrifying. WTF.
He tried to kidnap my sister in an attempt to get me to get back together with him. I knew it was a mistake from the moment I said yes. And it was just downhill from there.
And that strategy didn't work? Shocking. Sounds like you missed a really great guy.
It's one of those things where he had this weird justification in his head. For him, he thought he was getting closer to me by being closer with my baby sister. So he tried to get to know better.
He tried to RP me in his apartment. I broke away and drove through my tears.
Yeah, the creep. I did give a chance to did RP me. Then couldn't understand why I never spoke to him again.
A few years ago, I went to a brewery to meet a guy on a date for the first time. The waiter began a conversation and asked me if I was expecting anyone else. I told him I was on a blind date and hadn't met the guy before. The waiter asked me if I wanted to set up a code word. Since they didn't serve milk stouts, if I ordered one from him, he would know something is up and would call me back to have me sign the receipt instead. The waiter kept checking on me frequently. Eventually, I did order a milk stout. When it came time for the bill, I asked for it to be split. My date put his drinks on my bill. When the waiter came back, he told me he had the drinks removed. It was on the house. When my date asked me what that was all about, I told him the waiter had told me there was something wrong with my card, so I needed to go to bar with him. I waited a while and then left for my car. The date was still there. He made a comment about how he was waiting for a goodbye hug. I told him, no thank you, and that my car was in the opposite direction. Moments later, he sent me horrendous text messages. And thank you, John. You may have saved my life that day.
Badly. He became very stalkerish, was very insecure about other men, and tried to isolate me from friends.
The last 2 were how mine went. I no longer date people with self-esteem issues for this reason. If they believe themselves to be awful, their attitude usually becomes something like, if she'll date me, she'll probably date anything with a pulse. And that's how a guy ends up jealous of your 60-year-old boss or a store cashier. After a few dates, he started to get way too serious. I told him calmly and honestly that I wasn't ready for a serious relationship and he deserved to be with someone who was. He completely flipped poo, and after a bit of name-calling I stood up and started to leave the bar. He then said, "You should watch yourself in the future. Especially when getting into your car. I was extremely paranoid for months after. Would check my backseat and under my vehicle. Never saw him again, so just an empty threat, but not a fun time. That was like 15 years ago. Yeah, he's still single.
If I was a girl, I probably wouldn't date again. Holy F.
At the end of a weird and terrible date, he asked me for a hug as I was turning to leave. I thought, whatever gets this over with. As I was pulling away, he forcibly grabbed the back of my head and shoved his tongue in my mouth before I was able to break free. The next morning I had a 3-page email in my inbox telling me all the things that are wrong with me and why he is not interested in a second date.
What the F? This is so gross, I'm so sorry.
On our first date I ordered a beer. It came to the table super frothy. I was distracted for a moment, but when I looked at it again there were very clear, drip, marks in the foam like something had been dropped in it. I made up some excuse about not feeling well and got out of there. Oops. Can't leave. My dumbass drove and my car was valeted. I, very uncomfortably, got the car from valet and we both got in. He asked me to stop at a gas station so he could buy smokes on the way. Thank God, because I knew going to his house was not a good idea. As soon as he got out at the station I peeled out and left him there. I never should have let him in my car, but I panicked. I didn't know what he was capable of. This was 15 plus years ago. I'm now happily married to the best thing that ever happened to me.
Holy poo. Fast thinking on your part.
After years of telling the saga of a series of bad dates titled Head in the Freezer Dude, one of my friends asked me what he looked like. I googled him, only to find a mugshot after he was arrested and convicted for murder. Years after our last contact, he had found a roommate on Craigslist, had sex with him, bit the end of his finger off, killed him, then tried to burn the place down by turning on the gas stove, then starting the toaster with a newspaper in it, which didn't end up igniting. This was all on the same day he met the guy. And that, my friends, is how I dated a Craigslist killer. Edit, as requested, the story, link. Used to work in a small store and this creepy dude would try to flirt with me. I guess it was flirting, like once or twice a week. He seemed like someone who didn't have any friends and never socialized, but one day he asked for my number and it wasn't aggressive but pretty straightforward, so I was like, sure, I guess. Thought he was weird, but he knew where I worked so I couldn't really reject him. There was no way of knowing how he would react, so I had to keep talking to him from time to time to make sure he didn't flip poo on me since I worked at night. After like a few weeks of occasional short text convos, like maybe 2 or 3 few-word texts, he asked how old I was and he finally stopped talking to me because he was disgusted that I was 24 years old. He thought I was only 16. He was 28. He was a pedophile.
It's been over a decade now and he's still harassing me on every online platform he can find me on. He sends me incel memes about being rejected. Luckily we are not in the same city anymore, that I know of.
I'll give the rare success story, not with me, but it's not as bad as the others. He was sort of creepy and weird and neckbeardy. We hung out and sort of flirted because I didn't want to be seen as shallow and didn't know how to hold boundaries, but I wasn't really interested. I eventually just sort of stopped giving him attention and giving off signals. Apparently he made a couple snide comments to people we both knew about how I don't date monomuggles, monogamous people, anyway you, which is a DK thing to say. A few years later I saw him at a con and he waved me down and I was nervous, but he was like, hey, I wanted to apologize, I was a real prick to your friends, I've done a lot of work on myself and realized that women not liking me isn't a them problem, it's a me problem. I forgave him and we hung out a couple times after that at cons. Hence. Good guy. Just had been going through a cringy phase.
Ah, thanks. That is a good story. I think I had 20 years of a cringe phase. Ugh.
He showed up to my house without telling me beforehand and demanded a kiss before he left. He kissed with his eyes open and had cold, dead eyes. He was also a self-proclaimed Nazi and told me, I don't like black people, but you're okay. This was in high school, so luckily I learned fast to trust my gut when it came to guys. Mine is a lucky one. He got mad at me because I didn't have sex with in the first date. When I told him we could no longer see each other, he started sending me text calling me all horrible insults. I blocked him in all forms of social media and phone. So yeah, I'm lucky he didn't go farther after that.
We had a terrible date. I wanted to cancel beforehand but felt guilty doing it. He texted a lot after. I told him straight that I did not feel the same way about him and wait for it. He took it well. He thanked me for being straight with him and for giving him a chance. I hope he found someone. ETA. Didn't add many details because I truly was expecting this to get buried because of how mundane it is. The creepy behavior was, mostly, before the date. I was working a temporary bartending position while the usual bartender, a friend, was on unpaid maternity leave. It was a small, hole-in-the-wall type neighborhood bar. In addition to off-putting, creepy jokes and comments, there was also an incident where he offered to wait to walk me to my car and I declined. I still found him hiding in the shadows waiting for me as I walked out. He almost learned what a stun gun feels like that evening. He claimed he was just worried about me because he saw some sketchy people outside when he left. Do I know that's what it was for sure? No. I definitely questioned his motives, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I asked my friend what his deal was and she said he fell into the creepy but harmless category. After talking with him over the few weeks I was at that job, I took him as someone who had very poor social skills but not a bad person. I think the creepy vibe came from the lack of social skills. He needed a lesson in not trying to act cool or tough with his comments or jokes because it contributed to the creep for sure. I accepted the date on my last shift at that bar, figuring that if it went really badly, he didn't know where I usually work and I made sure to drive myself there and had people on standby should I need help. Thanks for the awards and to the lovely people in my DMs. You're all just gems, face with rolling eyes.
This is the happiest ending I've read so far. Which says a lot.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.